Today's video is brought to you by Athena.
The images of the water are shocking enough.
We can easily
Sense
take
drug.
19 million.
Kind of them, right? Disturbing reality of tap water. In President Barack Obama's final year in office, he visited Flint, Michigan, and while giving a speech to a desperate crowd, he drank a glass of water. For many, this was scandalous.
I really did need a glass of water. This is not a stunt.
At the time, the water had a high concentration of lead, which made it into the blood of the population, stunting the development of children, putting pregnant women at risk, and causing kidney disease. Obama's sip was to reassure residents, but it was a slap in the face to the thousands of victims of the Flint water crisis. Eventually, a judge ordered the city to replace lead piping, deliver bottled water to residents, and introduce water testing. But it was too late. The damage was done. The toxic chemical in Flint was lead, but all over the world, there are even more dangerous substances lurking in everyday drinking water that aren't even against the law, and they're already flowing through your blood.
New data confirms that our ecosystem is drenched with PFAS, from the rainwater to the food supply. According to a CDC report, more than 97% of Americans have forever chemicals in their blood.
And from arsenic and estrogen to prescription medication and plastic, this is a deep dive into how safe tap water really is, and who is selling off your health for profit. Doping up the population. We hear about the drug crisis all the time. More than 1 million people have died from overdose since 1999, and each year, more of those deaths come from opioids. But it's not only direct users being harmed. These chemicals find their way into water systems. More than 80% of the water in the US has some kind of pharmaceutical or stimulant in them. These range from relatively harmless substances like caffeine to blood thinners to antidepressants, antibiotics, and painkillers like opioids. What's standing in the way of us getting high from our tap water? It all comes down to treatment plants, which are the best protection for making water safe. They act like large-scale filters, taking in pollutants, wastewater from houses, agriculture, and stormwater. The numerous steps of filtering help to remove larger pieces like human waste and smaller pieces like sand before the water is clarified, disinfected, and certain nutrients are stripped. Then, the water is released back into the environment, like freshwater streams, to keep the cycle flowing. For the most part, these treatment plants do their job, but they get stuck when it comes to removing strong pharmaceuticals from the water. The majority of these aren't actually fully absorbed by the body. An enormous amount, between 30 and 90% of pharmaceuticals, end up in nature. Think about it. After you take a pill, it eventually passes through your body into the toilet. Or after applying a cream, it washes off down the drain. Unfortunately, most treatment plants aren't able to completely remove these chemicals. What's terrifying is that many of these medications are still active after they seep into the water and flow back into the environment.
Some of the drug comes in us and through us and out of us totally unchanged. So we actually have active drugs going into the waterway through our urine or feces.
Hormones like estrogen come from contraception pills and farm fertilizers made of animal manure. That's what led to alarming findings in marine life when it was discovered that over 80% of male bass fish in a river in Washington were now producing eggs. This was caused by synthetic hormones interrupting their endocrine system.
Over the last several years, the U.S. Geological Survey has tested the water, and something in the water is tampering with the hormones of 85% of the male smallmouth bass and a quarter of the male largemouth bass, and causing them to develop female reproductive traits. Pharmaceuticals from human waste that the upstream water treatment plant can filter, or
Another effect is that organisms become more effective against our bodies from the overuse of antibiotics. Antibiotics leak into the water system, making a great breeding ground for those bacteria, allowing them to get stronger and more deadly. Other chemicals, like one called atrazine, used in agriculture, can interrupt the menstrual cycle of women. Add to that arsenic, lead, and chloroform, and it makes you never want to drink from a tap again.
Your skin. Let me show you something. This is ordinary tap water, right here from Tucson. Okay.
These are the same pool test drops that you test for chlorine in your backyard swimming pool. I'm going to drop 5 drops in each one, and if it turns yellow,
look at that, immediately.
and it does, that means there's chlorine in there. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to dip my fingers in this one and swish it around to simulate taking a shower or a bath. Drop the same number of drops in the same water.
Look at that.
And where'd all the chlorine go?
Don't tell me it soaked into that quickly.
That quickly. All the chlorine in that glass was soaked into my skin that fast.
So, as I'm sure you're noticing, it's pretty clear we should not drink our water. But did you know that when you shower in this type of water, our skin absorbs all the chemicals like chlorine and worse 6 times faster than we can drink? That's why I shower with the Athena filtered shower head, to make sure I don't shower in water full of chlorine, heavy metals, and other chemicals. I've been using the Athena shower head for 4 weeks now, and my girlfriend and I both notice a huge difference. Like before, when I took a shower, I could just feel my fingertips and my hands be super dry after I got out, and my girlfriend's hair got super dry as well. If you don't have a filtered shower head, you need to go get one now, because showering in your tap water can also cause all sorts of health and wellness issues like dry skin, hair thinning, and dandruff, and so much more. Once again, psoriasis, not dandruff. Installing the shower head was super easy. It only took me 2 minutes. I love the shower head so much that I actually asked Athena to sponsor my channel, and they said yes. And even more important, for a limited time, they're giving 100 of our subscribers an extra 10% off their products using the code LIST25. You can click the link down below or just head to Athena.com and enter code LIST25 at checkout to claim this deal. And I want to thank Athena once again for sponsoring our video.
Greater water treating techniques do exist, but they still need to be widely implemented and can carry a huge price for installation. In Britain, the government estimated that it would cost over $50 billion to remove all synthetic hormones from the water. The principle of treatment plants is based on how nature works. If sewage is dumped into fresh water, then the ecosystem slowly breaks down and dilutes any harmful chemicals until it's clean again. But this isn't possible with a new breed of chemicals. In fact, they don't break down at all. Forever chemicals. The United States, New Zealand, and Canada all rank far behind the United Kingdom for sanitation and drinking water. In the US, dangerous chemicals like lead and arsenic have been found in water. But the most prevalent are a group of chemicals known by the acronyms PFAS. PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are synthetic chemicals that are used in manufacturing, aerospace, and automotive industries, all the way down to household products and food. In clothing, furniture, and food packaging, this quality is incredibly important. But it's also found in things like lotions, beauty products, and eye drops. Without getting too technical, they were first introduced to make materials non-stick and non-staining. These substances basically repel liquid, oil, and fat. You can see how this might be useful in a food package or a sofa. The brand name best known for this material is Teflon. Now, to get a little more technical, the problem with these chemicals is that instead of being made up of carbon and hydrogen atom bonds like organic molecules, PFAS, like Teflon, is created with bonds between fluorine and carbon. This synthetic composition makes them immune to almost anything, leaving them lingering in the environment for thousands of years, which is why they've been dubbed forever chemicals. Sometimes they make their way into the human body, through the workplace, from food packaging, or in everyday drinking water. Areas close to military and firefighting facilities are high risk. In firefighting, something called aqueous film forming foam is used to contain oil fires, which is a kind of PFAS. Just like in the environment, they can remain inside organs for years. Any amount heavier than 20 nanograms per millimeter, which is 1/1,000,000th of a gram, is considered dangerous. Researchers found these chemicals in over 97% of blood samples, meaning that most of us are already carrying them in our veins. The effects are slowly becoming more visible too. They've been associated with immune system deficiencies, developmental problems, obesity, and cancer. A law was proposed last year to ban 6 of these forever chemicals from drinking water. But the problem is that there are almost 15,000 of them. So, who's behind flooding the water with these forever chemicals? And why isn't anything being done about it? Most of the global PFAS production is controlled by just a dozen companies. Three of the biggest are 3M, Chemours, and Arkema, making up an industry worth around $28 billion a year. By some estimates, though, the amount that these chemicals are costing society is much higher, upwards of $17 trillion a year. The name Chemours might not be as familiar as the company it came from. Chemours is a spin-off from chemical giant DuPont, which created the company to try and, quote, offload its environmental liabilities to avoid lawsuits or penalties. You don't have to look far to see what activity the company is trying to distance itself from.
Well, today, DuPont and a successor company called Chemours agreed in principle to pay $670 million to more than 3,500 Parkersburg area water customers who claimed that the drinking water was contaminated and made them ill.
DuPont has been dumping forever chemicals into a North Carolina river and polluting the air for decades, but it gets worse. Companies like DuPont have secretly known about the dangers of these chemicals for more than half a century. Just like the tobacco industry, internal research uncovered the risks long before the public. Court documents revealed that DuPont and its competitor 3M both had evidence that PFAS was toxic to humans back in the 1960s. But first, let's turn the clock back to 1938, when DuPont became the first company to discover PTFE, the first kind of forever chemical, which it named Teflon.
Don't make a meal without that seal. DuPont, DuPont, DuPont. It ain't no deal without that no-stick seal. Here's what you want. Without these seals, you're out of luck. Don't get stuck.
This came just a few years after the company had developed nylon, synthetic rubber, and polyester. DuPont was on a roll. Within a decade, it was producing 2 million pounds of Teflon a year, some of it even being used in the military's top-secret Manhattan Project, which developed the atomic bomb, but mainly for household kitchens. After years of unbroken success, a 1961 study founded by DuPont showed that exposure to Teflon was causing the livers of rats to enlarge. There were also worrying reports of a number of factory workers falling sick and even dying after smoking cigarettes contaminated with PFAS. In public, DuPont strongly denied any link. However, secret follow-up research only confirmed the company's initial findings. Ingesting these chemicals was highly toxic. Over at 3M, one of DuPont's American competitors, they were undertaking the same kind of research. They found that workers had higher damage to their livers than usual, possibly higher rates of prostate cancer, and that these were both related to the level of fluorine in their blood. Instead of alerting the public, 3M and DuPont banded together to reassure everyone. They claimed that, as far as they could tell, there weren't any toxic or ill health effects caused by PFAS. It wasn't until 2000, almost 4 decades after the first research was commissioned, that either company took steps to minimize the damage they had unleashed.
The US multinational 3M says it's reached a tentative $10 billion settlement with several American cities to resolve water pollution lawsuits tied to forever chemicals.
In 2020, 3M announced that it would begin to phase out the use of PFOA and PFOS. The company settled a lawsuit in June of 2023 to pay out at least $10 billion to water providers for the cost of contamination. However, 3M refused to officially admit that it was liable for this contamination. Instead, it claimed that the settlement was part of its commitment to removing harmful chemicals from the environment and improving access to safe drinking water for the public. By then, forever chemicals were found in the water of 43% of zip codes in the US, over 2,300 reports in 2021 alone. Hundreds of millions of Americans have been using this water for everyday use. What's the solution then? If you think you can escape pollutants by drinking bottled water instead, well, think again. In some cases, bottled water is even worse. Bottling it.
The bottled water you buy at supermarkets or convenience stores might not be as pure or free of pollutants as you might think. That is according to an environmental group which tested different brands of water and found a total of 38 different pollutants.
Grabbing a bottle of water off the supermarket shelf, you expect it to be clean. Most of the brands advertise themselves as pure, healthy, natural, and fresh. You might be shocked to learn that many of the same chemicals found in drinking water are also found in bottled water. A test of 47 different bottled water brands found that many had detectable amounts of PFAS. One of those was Topo Chico, a water made by Coca-Cola which measured 9.76 parts per trillion. This may sound like tiny measurements, but the latest proposal for the EPA wants to set the limit at 4 parts per trillion, which would make Coca-Cola's product more than double the limit. And some believe that would still be too conservative. Depending on the brand, bottled water can be filled with nanoplastics too, tiny pieces of plastics that have broken off from products and materials. One analysis found 120,000 nano and microplastic particles in an average 500 milliliter bottle of water. Tiny particles like these can get into the tissues of our organs, disrupt our immune system, and cause cancer. But it's not only the water we drink that can be damaging to our health. Just like the growing fears about PFAS chemicals, experts have been warning about the dangers of a different chemical called bisphenol A, or BPA, for a long time. It became widely used in plastic containers, water bottles, and even dental products. It's been linked to serious issues in prostates, blood pressure, and even children's behavior and brains. It imitates the hormone estrogen and could be driving higher rates of breast cancer. Just like forever chemicals, BPA is everywhere. 93% of Americans have BPA pumping through their blood, and you probably do too. As concerns were rising, plastic producers found alternatives to rush to the market, which, according to them, were much safer. But be careful if you're looking for a BPA-free option. As it turns out, many of these alternatives are just as dangerous. They degrade over time until they're producing compounds exactly like BPA. That means the BPA in your blood could be passed down to your grandchildren. The exact effects of that are still up for debate, but the thought of what synthetic chemicals are inside our bodies right now is pretty unsettling. Now, wait until you hear what lies ahead. Selling off the future. Water is the most precious resource humans have, and for years, experts have predicted that the future won't be fought over oil, it'll be fought over water. Water for drinking, water for agriculture, and water for livestock. It's often used as a strategy for war. During the Ukraine conflict, Russia destroyed the Kakhovka Dam, causing catastrophic flooding and depriving thousands of water. Attacking water infrastructure is increasingly becoming a target. Russia's attack was just one of 344 around the world that year. With the security of drinking water at stake, the question we need to ask is, who exactly owns the water? In England, where the water system was fully privatized in 1989, owners have reaped the rewards for decades. Private equity has generated huge dividends for shareholders, £72 billion since privatization. Contrast that with the lack of investment in water infrastructure. Between 1900 and 1989, before privatization, over 170 reservoirs were created in the UK. Since then, only one has been completed, with one more in progress. When England was hit by droughts in 2022, many asked why more reservoirs hadn't been built, which could have helped to manage water flow. Meanwhile, public ownership could have reduced the inflation of bills paid by citizens instead of enriching shareholders. Hundreds of cities around the world have pushed back to effectively take back control of their water, but it might be all too late. Even where the public still technically owns waterways, often private companies find a way to squeeze the environment dry. Bottled water is still the most popular beverage in the United States. That's why food giant Nestle has negotiated deals so that it could use federal land for water production. In some places, it pumps millions of gallons of water every day to bottle and sell for profits. The price is marked up by hundreds of times the purchase price. It's easy money for drink manufacturers. You might not know that Coca-Cola turns over more than $1 billion a year from selling bottled water in the United States. Like its competitor Pepsi, Coke usually buys the same drinking water that's available to the public before treating it and selling it back to the public through brands like Dasani and Smartwater. The real battle is controlling regulation. In Maine, where Nestle has fought with local activists and residents to maintain a strong water bottle business, the company paid an estimated $634,000 to politicians in a 10-year time period. Along with those direct donations come the funding of targeted community programs, making sure that Nestle is able to keep local governments under control. At every level, the public is losing control of water. In the drinking water supplied to houses, in the bottles lining supermarket shelves, and even on public land. The result? is contaminated water, high prices, and in the future, probably more war. Water is essential to life. It's how our species evolved. Ironically, though, mismanagement and greed could mean that water is the way civilization and humanity is brought down.